Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 13 of Spy Family Season 3. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, things were pretty darn dire. You know, Lloyd's not in good shape, and Fiona, having sort of snapped, has proceeded to snap her own arm, so things aren't great there either, even if she does have the upper hand momentarily. So, at the very least, Fiona's sacrifice has not been entirely in vain, you know. She managed to injure the guy at the cost of her arm, which, you know, short term it might be a good trade-off, but long term, it's not good, man. You know, naturally it's being explained to us that this is, a sort of phenomenon that occasionally occurs. I think there's a technical term for it, but essentially, the adrenal gland dumps so much adrenaline into the human body that it sort of surpasses perceived limits that are set in place to prevent the body from injuring itself. You know, hence why Fiona was just able to wail on the guy so hard she fractured her arm in several places. You know, I don't think it was the first time this phenomenon was documented, but there is a famous case in the 70s where a car ran over a woman's kid and the car stopped over him or something like that. Something to the effect where the kid was ultimately pinned under the car. And the mother of the kid, just in an episode of, supreme adrenal induced, excitement, I guess, sort of lifted the car off the kid. And, cars are pretty darn heavy things. They weigh on the order of thousands of pounds. So, it's no small thing to do that. And, she was relatively kind of okay afterwards. I seem to recall there was some injury to muscles and ligaments and things like that. But that's kind of expected when you do something like lift a car. So, the interesting thing is that Fiona seems to have maintained this adrenaline surge for a bit longer than, I would normally think to be reasonable. She managed to not only break her one arm, but her other arm and one leg as well. So, that's not good. That's really not good to cripple 3/4 of your limbs. We're approaching, My Hero Academia levels here of self-destructiveness. The other interesting thing I guess I'm noticing now is that despite the big adrenaline dump and all that, Fiona hasn't passed out from pain or anything, because I guess it's not a given that she would just drop into unconsciousness, but I feel like there would be some sort of adverse effect from all the adrenaline and then suddenly, coming down off that. Ooh. Okay, so here's something. Lloyd is already sort of, rationalizing his actions, retroactively, I guess. The reason he didn't kill Yuri wasn't because he was worried about Yor per se, but because if he killed her, she would no longer have a reason to pursue this sham marriage. And there is something to that reasoning too, which is why it makes for a good excuse, but I think the real answer is, it's his wife's brother, and for that reason alone, he didn't really want to kill Yuri. So it seems like things are kind of looking up. There are reinforcements here. An able-bodied person who's well enough to carry the disabled Wheeler while Lloyd carries Fiona. Man, she's so shameless. She's like, oh yeah, no, I only broke, one bone in my leg. I can walk, as if she isn't absolutely enjoying this. Oh dear. So the question is, how shameless is she going to get? Really? Because, there's no way to tell. This is an unprecedented situation for her, but, I guess it's interesting that she's almost overstimulated rather than enjoying this. Ooh, okay. So that's, a little bit of a convenience here. Everyone's saying, wow, it's lucky that the state security services did mobilize in large enough numbers to put up roadblocks and they weren't coordinating with police. I guess it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't do that for a discreet little drop-off like this, but I've heard in writing that it's always good if you have a plot convenience that makes things more difficult for the protagonists, but if you have a plot convenience that makes things easier, that's just generally kind of not as good, if only because it removes potential entertainment. So I feel like this is, explained well enough, but I feel like it might be a missed opportunity, they could have to sneak by a checkpoint, that might be something. However, rather than contending with more state security services, Lloyd is bringing up his family issues, and, everyone here in the car really only cares insofar as how it pertains to Operation Strix, except for Fiona, who naturally wants to, help take over. She's incorrigible. She's like, oh, I'll come over and help things out and investigate. And internally she's thinking, yeah, I'll sabotage things. Oh my god. She's incorrigible. Lloyd should, maybe he shouldn't have been so kind as to set her one arm, Sure, it was only a dislocation, but I don't know, man. I think you deserve to be in the hospital for saying stuff like you've been saying. Alright, so this is something, Lloyd is cognizant that however bad things are at home, at least he has a home to go to, because had they failed to stop Wheeler, this whole thing would have gone up in smoke, and, the outcome for Yor and Anya would probably not be good for having been associated with a known spy, even if they were unaware. And more to the point, everything's sort of taken a nice change of pace with Yor being, kind and personable as normal. I mean, Lloyd, the poor guy, he's expecting subterfuge or something like that, but, it turns out the real subterfuge was, Yor had been gaslit by her friends into thinking she needed to start an argument. It turns out Yor is, I would say a reasonably good, caring wife, and Lloyd, the poor guy, is probably not too used to that. Oh dear. So, the situation's dire when Yor's, explaining things and saying, look, I'm the one who should be apologizing. Yeah, man, I really can't blame Lloyd for passing out at the at the sight of something like this. Like, all this trouble for effectively nothing. The real answer is that you're just kind of sobered up, having been drunk before. Wow. That's a reasonably small ask, all things considered. Lloyd effectively saying, hey, would you mind taking care of some of the housework tomorrow? Wow. So in a weird sort of way, Lloyd managed to 3D chess his way into making the right move. You're just sort of admitting that she really wanted to be relied on. She didn't actually want to complain. And I guess her concern, let's call it, does kind of make sense, seeing as how she can't really cook and she's not really super competent in other areas around the home. So a lot of that falls to Lloyd. And, his profession is, at least on paper, more prestigious than hers is. So, like, what does she really contribute to all this? Like, I can see being in her position, like, that's kind of a hard thing to contend with. And speaking of hard things to contend with, Yuri has decided now is the time to make his presence felt in the plot once more. So naturally, the thing he has in mind is that good old Lloyd here is actually Twilight. Little does he realize his suspicions are correct, but the real question is, how is he gonna go around procuring evidence? Because, surely he can't just, check his bicep for an injury, right? Lest we forget, Lloyd was shot in the arm, so seeing as how he hasn't gone to the hospital that we saw, he's gotta have, a bullet wound. Or perhaps not. Nevertheless, it's kinda suspicious to just do something like that, and claiming that you should roll up your sleeves when cooking is the safer thing to do. That's it's kind of a weak excuse. Maybe he could pass off his bizarre behavior on, the obvious head injury he sustained, but, man. Wow, it is over for Yuri. You're kicking him out. Oh boy, better not leave any, unattended ropes around Yuri after this, good lord. At the very least, good on Yuri for, sticking up for Lloyd, even if it is a seemingly trivial sort of thing. Oh, there we go. He just put a latex patch over his bullet wound. I have to say, it's rather remarkable that Lloyd was able to sort of, act normally with a bullet wound, because, as far as I know, the bullet's, lodged in there. And if it's actively bleeding, that's gotta hurt. Lest we forget, there was a whole episode where Yor was just really, really grumpy because she had been shot in the posterior and had to contend with the bullet wound. I imagine bullet wounds have to hurt a lot, especially when the bullet's still lodged in there, because, that's just gotta be uncomfortable, because it would inhibit how your body normally moves. So, I would have thought of the two, Yor would have had the better pain tolerance just by virtue of being, generally super strong and highly athletic, but perhaps Lloyd's just better at masking his emotions and all that. So now Fiona, the poor girl, she has to contend with that doctor. At least she's able to kind of set him down gently and fob him off, but yeah, she's got her work cut out for her. Mainly resting up and getting better, because, let's see, she broke one bone in her leg, she broke her arm in 3 places, the other arm was dislocated. Even if you pop your arm back into socket, I feel like, there's a fair bit of resting and recuperation you gotta do, just because, if all the stuff isn't aligned properly, you can, screw up your arm permanently. And I guess considering the nature of all these injuries, and that Fiona is one of very few agents at Wise's disposal, it kind of makes sense that the handler would show up. Yeah, okay, I kind of figured Fiona was in for a bit of chewing out, considering that, you know, she didn't necessarily need to recklessly smash her own limbs, you know. She probably could have defeated Wheeler without, like, you know, sticking her arm in the bone-crushing machine, as it were. Although that said, you know, the prognosis is positive. They were clean breaks, so they should knit and heal fairly quickly. But, I don't know. Can you really do anything other than, like, light desk work if you have a bunch of broken bones? I feel like she wouldn't be cleared for field duty, you know? I mean, at the very least, she should be resting for the immediate future, but, like, even if she gets, like, a walking cast or something, you know, I feel like she can't do any, like, running or anything. Wow, that's, kind of ungrateful, Fiona. It's like, you only care about me because I'm one of the few agents you have. It's like, yeah. This is like a game of national security. Give it the picture. And I suppose, just to like riposte Fiona's comment, the handler needled her about Lloyd in a real, plausible deniability kind of way. Fiona deserves it. Now back with the Forgers. It seems like Yor has improved a little bit in her cooking. You know, the food she made is not absolutely toxic, and Anya even says, hey, it's just a little bit tasty. So, I guess good on her, even if the sink is like a radioactive exclusion zone, by the looks of it. Alright, so here's the sort of big thing, you know. Lloyd's just resting, obviously. You know, after a big mission, he's got paperwork and he got shot in the arm, so he's gonna have to rest. He does offer to help with homework and all that, if necessary, but, you know, Anya at least has the presence of mind to say, nah, don't worry about it. Whether that's because she's being considered or because she's just going to ignore her homework remains to be seen. But seeing as how she's spending a lot of time with your drawing, I feel like homework is kind of gone by the wayside for now. And you know, I can't really blame Anya. Like, I'm by no means an artist. I think my art skills in terms of drawing have kind of stagnated since about the age of 5 or thereabout, but you know, there are days where I'd rather draw than do homework, and that's for sure. So I guess not to be outdone by all the animals Anya's drawing, you know, Bon wants to get in on it, pretending to be a lion, like the drawing and like the stuffed animal. And you know, it does sort of counteract all the work Yor had done brushing his coat, but if nothing else, it's sort of impressive how he's able to attempt to mimic all these animals, you know, without morphing his physiology. Because, like, you know, there's no way a dog can really, like, become more like a giraffe. You can just sort of take on the bearing of a giraffe. I like how, despite having, you know, brushed his coat and all that, Yor's getting on board with, like, helping him look more like a giraffe by wetting down the fur on his neck, you know, as if it isn't counterproductive. Alright, so this is nice, you know, the family minus Lloyd is just having a fun time together, brushing the dog, you know, and then you're ultimately brushing Anya as well. And I feel like we haven't gotten remarkably many moments where Anya and Yor bond in such a way, because I would say of all the intra-character relationships, theirs is possibly the weakest, just because, most of it seems to be Anya trying to avoid serious illness from Yor's cooking, and also, being interested in her being an assassin, but, for Yor's part, she's mainly just worried that she's not going to live up to, Anya's fictitious late mother who married Lloyd. And even then, that doesn't always come to the forefront either. So, unfortunately for Lloyd, no good deed goes unpunished. Everybody's being a little bit louder than he probably would like, but poor guy's just gonna have to lump it. Alright, so I guess to fill out the last little bit of runtime for this season, we're getting something a bit more experimental in terms of art style. Anya's just sort of having a fun time with Bond as he transforms into various animals. No doubt this is meant to be like a dream sequence or something like that. Anya imagining things as they could have been, when she and Bond were drawing all those animals and things like that, but I don't know, there's something nice about this art style. I don't think I would like the whole anime to look like this, but for this little sequence, it certainly is appealing. There isn't a whole lot of it that's substantial, but if nothing else, I do like to see Anya and her dog, I do have to say that probably my favorite moments in the manga and the anime are sort of centered on that. Specifically the bomb plot earlier on, but nevertheless, it is enjoyable to watch, if only for a little while. Yeah, so I guess it is a dream after all, and poor Lloyd, finally getting up, he comes out to the living room to see that everyone else is sort of conked out. There's something idyllic about it, Well, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.